Hello and welcome to Talking Aussie Books, a new weekly podcast shining a spotlight on Australian fiction. My name is Claudine Tinellis. As a writer and avid reader, I love chatting about books. And in this podcast, I'll chat to authors, publishers and readers, giving you, dear listener, insight into what's hot on the Australian fiction scene. So if you're looking for your next book recommendation or just want to know more about Aussie fiction writers, this podcast is for you. Grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and enjoy. My next guest is a Melbourne-based author whose first novel won the 2017 Victorian Premier's Literary Prize for an unpublished manuscript. It was the fifth manuscript he started writing, the second he ever completed, but the first he was willing to show anyone. With a working title of Decay Theory, it was later published to wide acclaim by Affirm Press in June 2018 as The Nowhere Child. Joining an illustrious cast of previous VPLA award winners such as Graham Simpson for The Rosie Project and Jane Harper for The Dry, The Nowhere Child is a gripping story of secrets, cults and memories which has been sold in 17 different territories to be translated into multiple languages. Topping that, the rights have now been acquired for a screen production, catapulting its author to international fame in a very short space of time. The Nowhere Child is a tightly constructed, nail-biting page-turner that had me hooked through its many twists and turns as we journey through the past and present to answer the central question, who took Sammy Went? I'm delighted to welcome Christian White to the podcast today. Hello, Christian.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting. And thank you for that ridiculously generous intro. That was amazing.
Not generous at all factual.
Yeah, I guess so. I think I'm so used to, I spent years sort of lying on my resumes and bios that now I can actually just tell the truth. It's a good feeling.
I can't imagine you lying on your resume. That's hilarious. Christian, not every literary award win translates into international success, but I think it's safe to say it has for you. Is that something you could ever have imagined when you entered your manuscript into the Victorian Premier's Literary Award competition?
No, not in a million years did I think that it would even be shortlisted, and let alone win and go on to this success. So I still wonder sometimes that I have this sort of this idea that maybe when I sent the manuscript off, I popped it in the post and was walking across the street and was mown down by a truck. And now I'm just in a coma and this is just some sort of weird, I'll wake up any moment and be very disappointed. No, it was a really ambitious competition to enter. And one of the reasons I entered was sort of to, to start getting my work out there. So it was more of an exercise of showing my work rather than thinking I was actually going to place or win. I was actually so sure that I wouldn't be shortlisted that about a week or so before the shortlist was announced, this is going back to 2017, they sent out this email that in my brain it said, thank you for entering. You've not been successful at this time, et cetera, et cetera. I thought it was a rejection letter. And then about a week later, the shortlist was announced. And, I was refreshing online to see if there was anyone I recognized on the shortlist, anyone I needed to be jealous of. And I saw, my name and I thought, oh my God, there's been some sort of mistake. They accidentally sent me a rejection letter. So I went back and read that email. And it was just about generic information about the night. It was nothing. There was nothing rejection about it. It was really, really weird. But I think I was so sure that was the outcome that my brain just sort of interpreted it that way. As soon as the shortlist was announced, my life started to just completely change. Did a 180.
Indeed. And so I've heard you mention that people started contacting you, publishers, in terms of trying to woo you.
Stephen King says this thing where he says, write with the door closed and rewrite with the door open. And what he kind of means, I think, is that, firstly, literally write with the door shut, lock out your distractions. But that first draft, that first early stage, it is just you and the manuscript. And that has always been I don't want to say easy, but really enjoyable for me. Working with the door closed has always been the easy part of the process. But getting my work out there and getting it in front of publishers and agents and all that sort of stuff, it just seemed like a fantasy. And so what happened when the shortlist was announced, all these publishers and things like that I'd been trying to figure out how to get my work in front of them. I Googled well, firstly, I Googled how to write a novel. And then when I'd written one, I Googled, what now, basically. But all of a sudden, all these people, these publishers who you were trying to get in front of, were contacting, just sending me emails. It was crazy. I don't even know how they got my email address. It was really, really weird. So all of a sudden, I went from having, from being kind of a nobody to getting on their radar. And I think that is what the VPLAs definitely do, but I think all competitions, I used to be really, I don't know why, but I used to be quite cynical about competitions, writing competitions. I used to think that there were thousands and thousands of entries and who knows, it was sort of, you had to be lucky to get read and all this sort of stuff. But I've since learned that's not the case at all. And actually I've since found out that the year I entered the VPLAs, there was something like 86 or 87 other entries. And I thought there would be thousands and thousands and thousands. So I think that it's actually really good odds. I hopefully anyone listening who has an interest in writing will kind of, hopefully be comforted by that and send some stuff off to some competitions, because it really does get your work in front of a larger audience.
I think there is a lot of cynicism out there about competitions, but your experience has shown they really do have the effect that's intended.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cynicism in general, especially with a focus on, we were talking before we started recording about Australian authors and how amazing it is that we're getting this kind of renaissance at the minute. But there is this real sort of cynical side. The amount of times I've heard, you can't make a living writing books in Australia. You can't do this, you can't do that. And that really affected me at the time. And I think that it's all largely bullshit. I hope you might have to bleep that out. I don't know if you're allowed to swear in the show. But I've since sort of learned that there's so much cynicism around writing, and I think it's a combination of I don't know what it is, but I think it's good. I wish I had have known then what I know now, that no, you can absolutely make a living out of it.
Now, Christian, as I mentioned in my introduction, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. But for listeners who haven't read your book, could you tell me a little bit more about it?
So it's about a woman in Melbourne. She's a photography teacher, and she's living a life of sort of, very passive, quiet life. And she's approached by this mysterious American accountant. And he has been investigating a kidnapping, a little girl who went missing back in the 90s from this little town, a fictional town called Manson in Kentucky. And he says, I think you are the little girl who went missing. And of course, she thinks that's crazy. But then she sort of delves into her family history a little bit, finds some things that don't add up, and feels, I guess, compelled enough to travel to Kentucky to investigate. It's a kidnapping story, but I think it's sort of told in a bit of a different way. And the chapters alternate between present day. So you've got Kim going back to Kentucky investigating, and then it goes to Manson in the 90s and sort of unpacks the kidnapping from a few different perspectives.
And where did you draw your inspiration for this story?
Really, the seed of the idea, this idea that what if my parents were my kidnappers, that sort of thing, came from this very strange conversation. Well, it wasn't strange. It was a heartbreaking conversation I had with my nan a couple of years before I wrote the book. It was Christmas Day, and we're having Christmas lunch, and my nan she's in her late 90s now, and she has dementia. So I was having one of these very kind of heartbreaking conversations with her about, who I was. I'm your grandson, Christian. That's your daughter, Kira. One of those awful things. And I started to think about how memory works. And because anyone who's had experience with someone who has dementia or Alzheimer's will know that it can go in and out. There's these lucid moments, and then there's these moments where they're just lost. And I started to think, how does memory work? And now it's great, because now I've written a book about it. I can call it research, but at the time I was just procrastinating. And I get these kind of I just get these little obsessions, and then I just want to learn about it and want to research it. So I was like that with memory. So I started to look into memory and how it works, and I came across this theory, as you mentioned in your intro. It was actually the original title of the manuscript, decay theory. And what decay theory suggests is that, well, it basically suggests that memory fades due to the passage of time, but which seems kind of obvious. But as you delve a little bit deeper into it, it talks about how we when we create a memory, we create this thing called a neurochemical trace, which is basically this kind of like a thread that you tug on to sort of drag up a memory. And this theory suggests that if we don't drag up or access a memory over a certain amount of time, that thread, that trace, will begin to fray and eventually break. And so we won't be able to access that memory anymore, but that memory remains whole. And it just sort of thumps around your head. You just can't have access to it, which when I came across that, I just was blown away by that. And I started to think, what if I have a memory that's whole and that's thumping around my head that I can't access, and what if it would rewrite my history? Because I think memory makes up so much of our identity and I sort of thought, what if I access this memory and it undid my identity? And then there's a bit of a gap missing. I think it's because I listened to a lot of true crime podcasts. I very quickly thought, what if my parents were my kidnappers? It really went there quite quick. And then I thought, that's a pretty cool idea. I was sort of actively seeking a cool idea to write a book. Like you said, I've tried to write 5 books in the past and only finished 2. And this is the first one I thought was anywhere near good enough to sort of show anyone else. So I was searching for this. I wanted to tell a kidnapping story, but I didn't want to tell a generic one or anything that had sort of been told before. And so as soon as I had that idea, I kind of knew I was onto something. And then really I just began to flesh it out. One of my other obsessions at the time, along with memory, was, and this is going to sound like it's coming out of nowhere, but was Pentecostal snake handling, which for anyone who doesn't know is it's sort of a fringe religion. If you have 5 days, Google it because you'll go down a rabbit hole. But basically, it's these a couple of churches that exist in the American South who worship God by handling venomous snakes, usually rattlesnakes and scorpions, and they drink poison. So I was obsessed with memory and obsessed with snake handling, and I thought, I'll just put them together and see what happens. And really, that's what The Nowhere Child is.
That was going to be my next question, and I was going to say, look, I don't think I'm giving away any spoilers by saying you explore these, pretty bizarre themes in this book, but to great effect. So I wanted to ask you, was this the reason Kentucky was chosen for the setting of Sammy's birthplace?
There was kind of the practical reason, which was I really wanted to explore this world of snake handling. And it, like I said, it's only still around in a couple of, I think 2 or 3 states in the American South, Kentucky being one of them. I just really like the idea of, what if you figured out that your parents weren't your parents, that you're kidnappers, and I sort of like the idea of her then discovering that, where I'm from is just as scary as anything else, So I wanted her to go back to Kentucky into this world, and that's the practical reason I wanted to set it there. But there was also the kind of pretentious reason, I suppose, and I talk about this in the author's note at the end of the book. I spent a little bit of time in Kentucky years ago, and I went to this place called Mammoth Cave, which is a mammoth cave, obviously. It's the largest underground cave network in the world, I believe. Someone told me that. I haven't double checked, but I think so. But it's this ginormous, beautiful, scary place. And I went on a tour of the cave, and you're walking along in a little tour group, and you're following these little lamps. And halfway through, you go to this huge chamber, and the tour guide says, "Okay, everyone, stand really still. We're going to turn out the lights." And they turned out the lights, and it was just so totally and primally and terrifyingly dark. The darkness that you could hold your hand an inch in front of your eyes and you couldn't see it. And I don't want to say it was a traumatic experience, because it wasn't, but I kind of carried it the way you carry a trauma, So it was this sort of so again, it sounds really pretentious, but part of the reason I wanted to set it in Kentucky was so I could kind of tap into that darkness. And in the book, Kim, the main character, as she kind of starts to come to terms with the idea that maybe she is this little girl who went missing, she imagines the little girl, Sammy Went, in this kind of void, this chamber in her mind, this big dark space. And I don't say it in the book, but in my mind's eye, it's always the Mammoth Cave. That's how I visualize it. So I think that that was a huge part of the reason as well.
The town of Manson, it's a thickly forested town, and for me, it seemed to be a metaphor for the shroud of mystery and secrecy that enveloped the town. So I got the sense that, even without the author's note, I got the sense that you'd spent some time there.
The way you put it sounds beautiful, and I wish I could say, yes, that was my intention, absolutely. But it absolutely wasn't, but that was a happy accident. I think a lot of people, I've been very fortunate. A lot of people, like the book, and a lot of people have said things like, the other day someone said, I love how everyone's going through an identity crisis. And I sort of said, yeah, I absolutely did that on purpose. And I didn't. It was just this sort of, I think a lot of that happens by accident, or intuitively, I should say. So, but yeah, you're right. It is this, I guess all small towns have that inherent kind of, secrecy and these different levels. Working on the second book at the minute, and it deals with a lot of these sort of levels of secrecy and layers of secrecy that exist in towns. That if you've been there, if you were born there, for example, you have access to more of the secrets than you do if you've just moved there, and how the longer you stay in a place, the more doors are opened, and all of that's really fascinating. And I think that all small towns have that, but particularly in Kentucky, it's this sort of a beautiful place, and you go to these little towns, and there's this incredible hospitality, and the food's amazing, and the people are nice, but at the same time, you get this sense that you are an outsider, and we should go now. I spent a bit of time in America, and it's kind of this. It was really fun to write something that was set there, because I don't know if you had this experience, but I grew up on American pop culture, books and TV and movies, and my wife and I always laugh about this, because there's all these movies that we watch are filled with targeted advertising for things that we couldn't buy, like Twinkies and beef jerky. I know you can get all this stuff now, but when I was a kid, what the hell is beef jerky? Yeah. I remember my first trip to America, I tried it, and it was disgusting. I'm a vegetarian now. Maybe there's a direct line between those two things. But it was sort of setting something in America. It was really fun to write something there, because it's almost like this fantasy world in a way. It's almost like setting something in Narnia, this kind of where everything's a little bit heightened and different and filtered through these. When I go to America, I feel nostalgic for a childhood that I didn't have there. It's a really interesting relationship I have with it. So it was really fun. Yeah.
So going back to the Pentecostal snake handlers, I kind of grappled with myself about asking you this question, but I'm going to ask anyway. The kind of research that you had to do to make some of the most climactic scenes of the book so realistic and terrifying. Yeah,
I did a lot of research. You can't see it, but I'm doing research in quotation marks, because it was definitely procrastination at the time. But I spent hours and hours and hours reading about it and reading articles, and also you can watch. There's a lot of stuff you can watch online. What was one of the most fascinating things about it is that you kind of, if you've not heard of it and you're just hearing it described now, you're probably conjuring this image of this sort of Gothic style, dimly lit churches, and people are in robes and things like that. But it's usually in these brightly lit churches that look like community centres, and there's just a guy in jeans and a plaid shirt playing the banjo, and next to him someone's handling a rattlesnake. It's a really interesting really interesting world to explore, I suppose. So I did a lot of research, and it wasn't just about snake handling as well. What was really interesting is that, I don't think this is a spoiler to say, that there's the central family in the book. One of them is, Molly. She is a true believer. She really believes in this faith, where her husband, Jack, has sort of lost his faith. And what was really interesting to me was just that tension, and that is that they happen to be Pentecostal snake handlers, but there's a lot of faiths like that. I knew someone growing up who, she was a Jehovah's Witness, and her it was a similar situation. Her mum was a believer and her dad wasn't, and they ended up getting a divorce, the parents, eventually. But there was this period of years where there's this tension within the family because, you know, the mother would sort of think the father wasn't going to go to heaven when he died. You know, it's this really, but it wasn't talked about. It was really, really strange. So it wasn't just, it was the idea of faith in general and religion and how that can create tension within families. I think that, you know, a couple of people have asked me if I'm anti-religion, and I'm certainly not. I was raised agnostic, but I've always had a fascination in all other religions, really. And I just sort of wanted to explore that kind of world and what tension that can create, but also push it to this limit where, you know, how much faith it takes to pick up a snake and handle it and believe so strongly that it won't bite you because God will stop it biting you. But if it does bite you, well, that is God's choice as well. And you know, when people get bitten and die all the time in this faith. And what happens is they'll get bitten and more often than not refuse to be treated because they think God will save them or God will take them to heaven. So it's this really, I mean, God's really got it worked out in this religion because whatever happens, he's in the right. But yeah, it's this really, there's something about the strength of faith that it takes to do these crazy things. And actually, I dialed back a lot of the more extreme practices, so it wouldn't seem too unbelievable, too far-fetched for the book. Yeah. And even so, I had an email from someone recently saying, you know, snake handlers, give me a break. And you know, she sort of thought it was too far-fetched. And of course, I sent her back, you know, a novel of an email back with all these links and all this kind of interesting information. I never heard back from her, weirdly enough. But yeah, in real life, they, you know, it's not just snakes, it's scorpions and poison. And there's a little bit of that touched on in the book, but really I focused on the rattlesnakes.
I was fascinated by that because when I was reading reviews, I did see a couple of people go, oh, yeah, like, give me a break. It's a bit far-fetched. And so I thought, I wanted to look it up, and I did, and was horrified to find it's actually real.
Not only is it real, but it's way worse than what's depicted in my in my book. It's pretty, the best stories, I think, come from real places.
Absolutely. So, Christian, I've read that you credited Stephen King's book On Writing for helping you with your own writing. And what is it, do you think, specifically about his approach to writing that resonated with you?
If any one of your listeners has an interest in writing and you don't have that book yet, go and get it in any way you can. What he does in it, it's sort of this two-pronged attack. It's half memoir, so you are, you know, you're there in the room with him when he finds out Carrie's going to be published, and you know, when you see his financial struggles before he became this famous writer and all this stuff. So it's this really inspiring story, and the other half is here's how to do it, and he lays out in very, very practical terms how to write a novel. And really, I followed it to the T, and the book came out as a result. The only sort of rule that he laid down that I didn't follow was he said, I think he said 180,000 words is a good aim for a novel. And I was like, that's way too long. No one's going to publish a debut author with 180,000 words. So I aim for 80. And and I just really just followed him, and the book came out. It's funny that, I don't know, it's rare that people talk about writing books in just practical how-to terms. You know, I was chatting to someone recently who studied writing at uni, and I studied screenwriting, and screenwriting is really, you know, you can break it down into acts and chapters and structure, and it really teaches you how to tell a story. Whereas this girl I was talking to who studied writing, she said she came out the other end. She said she went in trying to learn how to write a novel and came out not really knowing how to write a novel. And it's because it's so subjective and there's so many different approaches you can take. So I think what's refreshing about On Writing by Stephen King is he just talks about it in really realistic, practical terms and makes it feel certainly not easy, but he lays it out in a way that if you it's sort of like when someone asks you, you know, how do I lose weight? And there's all these diets that conflict with one another and all these different exercise programs. But really, the boring secret is that you just have to eat well and exercise. That's what you have to do. I'm sorry, it's really boring, but that's the thing. And with writing a book, it's all you have to do is read a lot and write a lot. And basically, that's the main lesson in his book. It's like you just have to do it. And I think that was just really helpful for me to read and put it in a realistic. Just to feel like this is a realistic achievement. And he even has, you should try to reach this amount of words per day and all that sort of stuff. And it kind of, I don't know, I think that writing, it's really, really easy to procrastinate and really easy to come up with reasons not to do it. And, some people, I know I've been guilty of this before, that will spend, a day on one paragraph trying to get it perfect, and really that doesn't matter. It's sort of, if you do that, that's fine to do it. But if you really want to get your stuff out there, you're going to have to, let a lot go and just kind of do it and not, there's a lot of excuses. Life gets in the way. But what this book says is that, if you let life get in the way, you'll let it get in the way. But the trick is not to. Basically, the lesson of the book is it shows you how to not let those distractions get in the way of writing.
Yeah, put your bum on a seat and write. Are you seeing your book pop up in other countries yet?
Yes, I actually, I've been getting multiple covers from all over, which has been really, really wild to see. It's out in America and the UK and Spain now. And I actually just got a Spanish version of the book, which just, it's the weirdest. The last sort of year and a half has been full of these little bizarre, surreal moments that I fantasized, but I'd never actually thought I'd get to experience. And that was definitely one of them, seeing it in another language. The idea that people all around the world are reading it is pretty crazy.
So, Christian, you've recently been shortlisted for an ABIA in the general fiction category. Congratulations. And how does this make you feel?
It makes me feel pretty excited. Up until the VPLAs and these nominations, I think the only thing I ever won was in about grade 4. I was in a running competition, and I think there were 7 people and I came 7th. But because they were very supportive, everyone got ribbons. So if I win the ABIA, I will take down that ribbon from the mantle and replace it. No, it's pretty great because it does feel. Awards are. They're trivial in a way. Who cares? But you kind of do secretly care, So just the nomination is pretty amazing. I'm nominated for 2, Best General and then Best New Writer. But I'm certainly getting my sort of look that, I'm fine that I didn't win look. I'm getting that expression that's like I'll sort of, it's like smiling, but it's kind of gritting your teeth at the same time. So I'll get it. I have been practicing. I've been practicing that more than I've been practicing an acceptance speech. So we'll see.
So you've just said that you are working on a second book at the moment. And when are we likely to see this on the shelves?
So that should be coming out in Australia in November. And then America and hopefully other places, probably 2020. But it's called The Wife and the Widow, and it's a murder mystery this time, and it's told from the perspective of the widow of a man who's murdered and the wife of the man accused of murder.
If listeners wanted to find out about you and your books, where can they find you?
So I have a website, christian-white.com, which you can email me through. I'm also on, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all that sort of stuff. I'm terrible at social media, so please come and follow me and all that sort of stuff. So it looks like I am more popular than I actually am. But the best place is probably my website, and you can email me through there. And I love hearing from everyone, especially if you've read the book, and you just want to drop me a line to say nice things or mean things in a constructive way. I'm always open to it.
That's fantastic. Christian, it's been such a thrill for me to chat to you today. You're a shining example of the kind of persistence needed to succeed as an author. I'm sure this is just the start of what will be a very long and successful career as a novelist. Thank you so much for joining me on Talking Aussie Books today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And for a chance to get your hands on a signed copy of this explosive debut novel, head over to my Instagram account and follow the directions to enter the draw to win. Well, that's a wrap, folks. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes or drop me a line via my Instagram at Claudine Tinellis or on my webpage claudinetинellis.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, happy reading.